pressing the button.
Do it.
I did it.
Did you press the button?
I pressed it.
Oh, we're on. What's up, SolidWorks nerds? How we doing, Garrett?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Not much.
Yeah, busy week?
Good. Welcome. Yeah, it's been a busy one. Added another certification today.
Nice. What'd you do?
Did the certified professional for flow simulation.
Nice.
It was a fun one.
I should do that someday.
All hands on.
I should definitely do some flow simulation, but
you should.
Yeah, I need to learn some more flow simulation. I need to at least go through the tutorials and stuff. It's been a long time.
Yeah. All the simulations. Well, cool. What are we up to today? What do we got going on?
Design libraries, man. I think we're kind of continuing that theme of like just working smarter inside of SolidWorks and not doing the same thing over and over again. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. The whole reason to use a system like SolidWorks anyway. Don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Yeah.
Good
I always tell people.
Well, I think we'll
go for it.
Well, I was going to say we've got a little bit of variety here for using our design libraries. So we'll plan to go through a few different items like welding profiles, using things like specific cut features and what some of those tools or folders and stuff actually mean in there, like forming tools and assemblies and that kind of stuff. So should be fun.
Nice.
Didn't mean to cut you off there. A little bit of a delay, so it's hard for me to keep that under
Yeah, we should do this when we're in the office sometime.
Yeah.
That would be good. Give it
probably
a shot.
A little better internet speed.
A lot better for me. Cool, man.
Let's see. We've got a tip of the day. Got a tip of the day that we'll get into first. Let me go ahead and show my screen here.
Still figuring out that fun Dell driver stuff.
Oh yeah,
looks like. I'm so glad I didn't pick the T series, man.
It works fine most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. It's just when it doesn't that is
exactly.
It's fun.
That's right. After it flickers like 4 or 5 times, you're usually good. All right. Tip of the day. You guys have seen me do this maybe once or twice before, but thought I'd talk through it again and even show it on a little bit different examples so you can kind of see the magic here. So the shortcut for today is tab to hide, right? So I've got my mouse cursor floating around out here. You can hover on all these parts. As soon as I press down the tab key, everywhere that I move my mouse and it touches a component, it's going to hide that component, right? So it's actually kind of fun to do this. You can just drag through all these parts and they'll start hiding right away. So that's pretty fun. You can just hide all this stuff. And of course, like we mentioned, you can just hold Shift Tab to bring those parts back. So a quick little shortcut if you need some visibility changes. Now, I think I got everything brought back, but how do I know for sure? There's a couple of ways you could do this. One of which, if you hold down Control Shift Tab, you can actually see some of those parts become a little bit transparent. They're still in the hidden state, but all you have to do is click on those components and they'll actually come back. So it's one way you could do it. The other one that is a little bit easier, show hidden components. It's going to sort of flip.
It's always my go-to right there.
Yeah, it's going to flip it the opposite direction. So right now I can see those components and all I have to do is select everything that I see at this time. You'll notice I've got this other little toolbar here that's up. As soon as I exit the show hidden tool, brings my graphics area back to what it was before. All the assembly parts are there, so we're good to go. Fun little tip.
Nice.
Hopefully you guys can get some use out of that.
Yep. I use that one all the time along with, I think, like Isolate. Isolate is another one of those like really cool like visual commands and stuff that you can use to
Yeah, absolutely.
work on just a subsection of your assembly. But we'll have to talk about that later.
Yeah. Works for multi-body
Cool,
parts
man.
too.
Yeah. Which is kind of what we're going to talk about next a little bit, at least profiles for weldments, which are multi-body parts. So
that'll be the first part of our design library discussion. So I guess what this all comes down to is what can I start reusing, right? When we talk about structural members or fasteners or just things that you're going to use as common components, all this kind of stuff can live in your design library. So we're going to take advantage of it wherever we can.
yeah, and anything that you create, you can reuse again, right? I think that's just kind of one of the mottos of SOLIDWORKS in general.
Yeah.
Probably just parametric design in general. Just it's all about design reuse, right? So some of the stuff that we're going to look at today using this library features are going to be weldment profiles first. Then we're going to look at reusing features, reusing sketches, making annotations and stuff easier to reuse, right? Not having to go like find some random drawing somewhere or something like that.
Yeah.
And then just some of the other kind of like random options inside of the, we'll look at some of the other random options inside of the design library. There's some stuff that we're not going to get into, like smart components, that I think we're going to probably dedicate like a full episode to talking about. So,
oh yeah, could easily be its own video.
Get started. Yeah, yeah. Definitely a really cool functionality that's underutilized. But so the design library in general is severely underutilized. So, I'll go ahead and show my screen so I can start taking a look here and pull SOLIDWORKS up. So if I'm going to create a weldment profile, one of the first things that I'm going to want to do here, and a weldment profile isn't really like part of the design library, but it is the library feature, right? And a lot of the components that we're going to be pulling out of here are library feature parts, which is a special file format. So if you're going to create a weldment profile, one of the first things you want to do is figure out where your weldment profiles are, because you're going to want to save to there. So you go to File Locations, hit your drop list, and scroll all the way down to the bottom here, and you can find weldment profiles and find that location where you're going to want to save this. If you're creating custom weldment profiles, then you're probably going to want to have a shared location for that, whether it's inside of your vault or out on a network drive or something like that. But you want to make note of that.
Yeah.
So
it's good that you point that out too for custom weldment profiles. I always suggest point that folder somewhere else besides the default, because the next version of SOLIDWORKS you install, it's going to try to go to that default location. I've seen a lot of people overwrite the weldment profiles that they had. So make sure you set up a custom folder.
I've had 2 versions of SOLIDWORKS installed on this machine. I only have 1 right now, but if you look at my file path, it's SOLIDWORKS 2 that I was referencing there. So so let's go ahead and create a profile shape here real quick. I'll just do something really simple. Like I always tell people, I'm like the data management guy, so I don't have to be good at SOLIDWORKS. I don't have to make it look fancy, right? I can make mistakes all over the place and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, why not?
You know, maybe we want to do just a piece of like round stock or something like that, right? And let's just do like 1 inch. So it's not tubing or anything. This is just a piece of round. And if it's a weldment profile and you want to be able to connect to different locations on the profile, you also typically want to put in points as well. Just use your sketch point and connect that at any of the locations where you might want to pierce the profile and stuff. You don't really have to do that with the origin. That's automatically recognized. But once I have that, typically for a weldment profile, you actually also are putting in a description here that will actually fill out the information in your cut list. I'll copy the property from file, so you can do like 1 inch. I don't even remember what round bar. Oh, don't hate me, guys. So that property is going to be copied into my cut list. So make sure you get it right and you don't just fake it like I do. But anyway, once I have this guy selected, what I'll do, I'm going to make sure that I have the sketch selected before I try to save a weldment profile here. But you go ahead and select it, go up and do a save as. And we're going to change the file format here. So I should be able to change it to a SOLIDWORKS library feature part, which I always have trouble finding. It's right there, SLDLP.
Me too. Whenever I'm looking for it is when I always miss it.
Yeah. And this auto by default takes me down into the design library, which is not the location for my weldment profiles. So like I said, mine's out here. Let's see, in my program files on my D drive, I've got 2 versions of SOLIDWORKS installed. So it's really important that you do check the file path. And this is going to be Lang, English. This is just the default location, weldment profiles. And then, you know, I've actually specified, I downloaded over on the design library, you can actually, you can actually download a bunch of standard profiles. But inside
That's one thing that I hear pretty frequently when I talk with people about weldments. If they've only used them once or twice, they usually tell me there's not a whole lot there for me to use. Then they don't know that there's actually a downloadable library that's right in the design library. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And these ones look like configured profiles. You can kind of tell if you're using an older version of SOLIDWORKS, when you go into the standard, then it's going to go into like the shape and then the actual profile. So there's going to be like multiple folders there. I can't remember. Maybe it's just a shape and then all of them are in that, the different sizes of that shape. But here I can see all of the shapes are just different named profiles. So I should be able to just come in and say round or whatever as I want to call it. And this could be, like I said, a configured part. You could have configuration specific properties to fill out all that information, but that's how you create a library feature part. And it should change the icon over here in the tree. The sketch down here, it should have the little L looking icon on there to show me it's a library feature part. So
easy enough.
That's how we create a weldment profile. It's easy.
Good stuff.
If you know how to do it, right?
Yeah, the big part of that always gets missed, and I think we've talked about this before, is pre-select that feature that you actually want to treat as something that's in the library.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the reoccurring theme that we're going to tell you over and over here, right? So
exactly.
I think you have the next thing, all right, Brandon?
Yeah, let's take a look at what it would be to create just kind of a regular library feature part, maybe something that will add a cut to an existing design or something like that. Just real simple things that you don't want to have to do over and over again. You can always just create it. I always refer to it as kind of a dummy file, if you will. When you set up these library feature parts, you're basically just building some simple geometry to start with. You're going to add a couple of other features to it, whatever the case might be, and then you finally save it to your library.
Yeah, I always tell people that I'll do something like exactly twice. If I ever have to do it again, like I'm going to look for a much better solution.
Oh, there we go. Blinky.
Am I going to be showing how to do everything today?
I think it's back.
Oh, we're back. Yeah, I can see your screen now.
All right.
Saved.
So
you guys didn't want to see that anyway. You don't want Garrett to do everything. That's bad for everybody.
Let's start with something simple here. So I'm just going to maybe drop in like a little block here. We'll get it all fully defined. I don't know.
Creating this block is also like really important too, because when you create your shape, you're going to be creating dimensions and like references and stuff. And if you make like dimensions to any part of this block that you're kind of creating your sketch for your cut on, it's going to ask you to reattach those references.
Yeah,
right, Brandon?
Exactly.
So you gotta. Nice.
So that's the part that we want to kind of think about here. Now that I've got some base geometry, if I'm going to go cut through this thing, well, how do I actually want to reuse this? Because like Garrett said, it's going to ask you to reattach those references. So I want to think about, okay, I'm going to maybe cut from the top face down through this part, something like that. And maybe I'm going to measure from the edges of the block to the center of the hole. So when I create that sketch, that's how we'll do things. So right from the top, drop in a hole.
And you're going to want to avoid that
That's,
coincident relationship you put at the origin too, right?
yeah.
So if you're going to go off an edge, you got to make sure that you get rid of those. So
Yep.
yeah, I always put it just slightly off, so you don't make it on accident. Or you can use that
Did it
control
without
key,
even
like
thinking
you were
about
saying
it
the other day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe we'll do something like go an inch from there. And these are just kind of placeholder dimensions is a good way to think about it, because you can modify this stuff once you get into your actual use case of reusing this feature.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I do like you can name those too, right? If you wanted to do like X offset and Y offset or something like that, naming those dimensions are going to show up in the library feature part they're making when you reuse it.
Good point. Easy enough to change those after the fact too, if you just double click a dimension. So that'll be Z direction, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, just something that makes sense. You know, you could do the same thing with the diameter if you wanted to. If you want to make that variable, it doesn't always have to be the same size.
All right, so we've got our geometry built. We only want to take the cut extrude and reuse that. I don't need the dummy block coming into every part that I drop this thing on. So the only feature that we're going to select here is just that cut extrude. Then we'll do our save as.
Ooh, and I always do this different than you do. I'm interested to see if yours works. I'm sure that yours will. I always go a different path than you right here.
Oh, is that right?
I always just drag and drop the feature right into the design library.
Got it.
And it is nice to do it that way, because then you don't have to browse down to the folder, because the folder already shows up over in your design library. But
I like that.
Either way works.
So I got my serial number turned on here too. So we'll just say this is cut, extrude, whatever. There we go. So we got the little L symbol there on the feature that we want to carry over. It's going to ignore the block when I go to reuse this thing. It also places in some information that can be useful here too. So like the dimensions for controlling what you want this thing to do. These are all things that you can even reorganize too. So like it makes sense here, my Z offset and the one that I didn't rename, these are going to be locating dimensions, right? So you could put these in that folder there if you want. Just kind of makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Now,
I've never
in my
That's fun.
In my case, I kind of want all of this stuff modifiable, but something that I also like is this internal dimensions folder. If I were to take this dimension, I'll just maybe do it as an example so we can see it. I'm going to take the diameter and drop that into the internal dimensions. What we'll see happen here is that is now only controlled within the library feature part. I can't modify it when I'm reusing it. So if you have stuff that you want to lock down, you can certainly do that.
Oh, is that part of a class that I didn't teach, that I skipped over because I didn't read the book completely before I had the class?
Could be. I'm trying to remember if I think I did that one in advanced parts. I think that's where it was at. Anyway.
Sorry, everybody who I taught how to use SOLIDWORKS.
All the little things. There we go. So there's our library feature part. Now I can start reusing this in any other place that I want to. So maybe, I don't know. Let's see if we got something.
Just create a new part, maybe. Oh yeah, that would work too.
Sure. we'll use something like this. Let's say we just wanted to cut into one of these faces here or something like that. I don't know. I don't have any real great measurement points, but that's okay.
Yeah, you won't be able to attach both of the edges, but
yeah,
it works.
Still got that file open, that's fine. Right, so the cool thing about this is if you wanted to configure that library feature part, you can add different sizes. Like if you wanted the user to just pre-select a size and not have to mess with inputting dimensions to change this, that would be a really nice place to kind of standardize it. But here's where it's going to ask me for those references. So I can just go through and reattach some of those edges that I want to measure from. Maybe we'll pick something here that's at kind of a weird angle, whatever.
Oh, it did work though. Nice.
Yeah.
And this is actually a really good example too, because you could use a feature like this for like a bearing on something like this, right? And it could be configurable, right? So if you're using a bunch of those bushings or bearings or something like that, and you like even have the precision and stuff on that feature, on that sketch dimension, like you could save a lot of work.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. So now if I wanted to dial this in a little bit, obviously you've got your dimensions. It just kind of places it wherever you clicked on that face to begin with, but you can come in here and just modify those dimensions, make it an even number if you want. The thing that I mentioned before too with those internal dimensions, notice I have no chance now to modify my diameter if I want that to be pre-configured and not modifiable by the user. There we are. It is what it is. So brand new library.
Yeah, and that pre-configured dimension could work really well for something like a bearing, where the tolerance is exactly this.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. I guess then it's my turn to show something else again.
Yeah, let's see what we got.
Let's see. Go and share. All right. So let's say you created like a sketch that you wanted to be able to reuse, right? So you don't necessarily have to create a design library part to be able to reuse stuff, right? Let's say you just wanted to create like a sketch or something like that you want to reuse over and over again. You can come into your design library. You don't even have to like browse out to that, but you can just right click and say new folder. And I could say, oh, I'll call this like sketch blocks. And if I select it here, I can just grab my sketch, drag and drop it there. By habit, I always hold control. I'm not sure if that's actually necessary. I should probably try it without. Nope, I'm doing that for no reason. Good times. You can put in like the file name that you want and give it a name, right? And this name is going to show up over in the tree here. So when I hit OK, I'm going to get a preview of that sketch block, and I'm going to see the description or the file name down here.
Nice.
If you want to reuse it, you just like branded it, you just drag and drop it out, and you get your sketch block. Right. And again, if you were going to do like a cut or something like that, that would be much better for like a library feature part, like what Brandon showed. But reusing sketches and stuff really easy to do. So
excellent.
I'll go ahead and show you actually one of my favorite features. I'll just go ahead and continue showing my screen here so you guys can, so we can move on through this. But I created another folder here for notes, right? So if I go ahead and create a new drawing here, let's go with something that doesn't look terrible, like a B or C size. No offense to whoever created the SOLIDWORKS A size drawing, but it's awful. It looks terrible. But anyway, so what I did here, I'm sure they're not, right?
We'll find out.
There's no way. It's not like the SOLIDWORKS community is small and yeah. Anyway, the setting that I'm going to use, I'm going to really rely on here you go up to your drawings and to your settings here, and then to drawings. And I think I might have shown this before in just a tip, but if we go to drawings, there's a selection right here. By default, it's checked to disable note merging. And in order to do what I want here, I'm going to have that disabled, or I guess it's enabled, unchecked.
I haven't had to change that one in a long time.
Yeah,
kind of forgot it was there.
This is something that does like demo really well, right? Like if for you application engineers out there, if any of you are watching, oh shoot, I need a model. I don't know if I got a good model that I could throw up here with some dimensions. This is going to be ugly. Hopefully that's not an important part. All application engineers, you should never do what I'm doing right now. You should have planned what you are going to do before you do it. All right, so here's my part, right? One of my favorite drawing tips, which I should probably be saving for another video at some point, is this. All right, we insert our model. Everybody knows that you can insert like your model like dimensions by going to annotations. This is something I didn't do actually when I worked in industry. I never reused model dimensions. But probably one of the biggest problems that people see with this often is that the dimensions look kind of junky. So what you do is you select one of them. You do Control A to select every dimension or every annotation of that type. You use a little flyout window and you auto arrange. And if I picked a good model, it's going to look like 100% better than it did when I imported it. You can always like drag and drop dimensions.
A lot cleaner than it was.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's probably like my favorite drawing tip. My second favorite drawing tip here, now that I have used my ADD, I need to say I had notes, standard notes and stuff that I wanted to bring in here, or semi-standard, right? If they were standard, I could just make it part of my drawing template and I don't have to like change it. But let's say it changes just a little bit. I could have a note section and like maybe I just drag and drop out that note. And then if it's a bulleted note list like this, you can just drag and drop those out and they will stack on top of each other for you.
Nice.
Right? So you can kind of build these, and you can create folders and subfolders in here too. So if you had a bunch of these different ones, you can just drop them in there. Yeah. And if you want to create one of these standard notes, you just do it a lot like what we've been doing before, where you say, see, you know, whatever it is that you're gonna call it. You just grab it. This way, I do actually need to hold control to drag it in there, right? Give it a name, give it a description. Oh man, can't type. Right, there it is right there. If I want to use it, I can just delete it, drag and drop.
Good stuff.
Really easy, really fast to do.
You only had to do it once.
Yeah. And you know, it's all about not having to do that same thing like over and over again. Typing, hate typing. Yeah, you know. So
right there with you.
Difference. One of the other things, if you did want to set up like a weld note or something like that, those actually have a different file type, but you create them the same way or save them the same way that we've been doing this other stuff. So if you create a surface finish or a weld symbol, you know, you click on the geometry location that you want this to be, or you specify, you know, weld type, the size, something like that. Ooh, where'd she go? Did I hit cancel or something? I must have. Huh. Interesting. But if you don't want to have to, fill that out every time, you can just control drag it over here, and it's going to create that special file type that you need. Right. I think that's one of the reasons why I really like that control drag option, is that it's really intelligent about the way that it adds things to the design library. So.
That's a good way to do it.
That could be a geometric tolerance too, if you do a bunch of that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bunch of other stuff in that design library folder too, some of which we'll take a look at here. Let's see. Got me again? I got a weird blue square up here now. That's cool.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I do see an empty part though, so.
Okay, that's where we're at. So inside that design library folder, you've also got, let's talk about this one next, forming tools. All right, so you notice it's got a special little icon on it. This is a folder specifically for forming tools that you would use with a sheet metal part. All right, so you can obviously make your own of these if you wanted to. We can go ahead and make one, I guess, if you want to get into it. How are we doing on time? We getting into a long one here?
Yeah, maybe we skip out on the creating our forming tools. We got other things we got to talk about still. So, but I think the interesting thing with that specific icon is just the way that it treats the library feature parts that are in there, because you can actually say I think you can save like 2 different file formats for library feature parts, right? There's like a forming tools part that you can make, and then you can create a library feature part. And if it's a forming tools part, it doesn't matter what folder it's in. It will always work. If it's a library feature part, yeah, there you go, SLD FTP, the forming tools part. If it's a LFP part, though, it will only work if it's marked as being part of that forming tools. It will only work as a forming tool if it's, you get it.
Exactly. So the critical part of that is, if you're going to set up your own forming tools folder, just make sure that when you point to it, you're going to right click on it from the design library, make sure that it's specified as a forming tools folder, right? So you'll be able to actually use the library feature parts and stuff that are in there. But that's really kind of the big thing to remember about the forming tools folder. And once you actually start getting into, using that stuff for sheet metal, we're just going to make a quick little base flange here. I don't know, we'll do something like this. Drop it on the midpoint, make that bottom one construction. See how big this part is.
I'm going to do some sheet metal.
Yeah, there we go.
Nice.
So we're going to make a little enclosure here. We'll do like 8x4. Hop up to our sheet metal tab. We're going to just treat that as a base flange. So if you're not real familiar with using open contours for sheet metal, that's the default behavior you get. It's essentially just going to thicken those lines and give the corners a radius, which is pretty nice. Then all you've got to do is set up whatever you want your end condition to be. So if you're going to make it like a 6-inch wide piece of sheet metal or whatever, I'll just use one of the standard gauge tables here. There's some that come with SolidWorks. We could probably do another video on that too. Just talk more about sheet metal setup.
Sheet metal.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know how many calls of sheet metal we've had over the years, but it's definitely been a lot. I think just on that that tech support question that we had in one of the first videos, I probably have had like 50 calls over the years at least.
Oh yeah.
With the drawings configuration.
So now that I've got a base flange that I can actually use, here I've got a bunch of different forming tools. This is one that I created for a training class, but if you look in the folders that are already there, for things like louvers, for example, You got a louver here that you can use. You can change the dimensions of it. Sheet metal ribs, lances, all kinds of fun stuff. This one kind of looks fun. Maybe we'll drop this.
And you can
one
make
in
them kind of look like whatever you want, right? As long as you're using the forming tool.
Yep,
do
exactly.
A lot of different stuff.
So I like to think of this, it works a lot like Hole Wizard, if you're really familiar with that tool, right? You're just gonna drop it in, specify the type. We'll get into all the settings and stuff here, but if you want it on one side or the other, right, that's pretty easy to flip it, and then you just specify where you want to actually place this thing. So if you have critical dimensions, we're measuring to the insertion point of that forming tool.
I'd be really curious if somebody was watching this and wasn't familiar with the Hole Wizard.
Mm-hmm.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. There you go. So
nice,
easy way to.
And it's a feature that you can just use over and over again.
Exactly.
Too, right? It's not.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome.
So we got our forming tools folder, all your sheet metal stuff there. You've also got this assemblies folder here, which kind of brings up a point we were talking about the other day. When you look at that right click menu, I hadn't really ever used this before. When we started exploring it though, that assemblies folder checkbox there really is just a filter that you can apply to these folders. So give you an example here. In the standard design library, they have a folder here that contains a mold base. If I go and switch off the assemblies folder there, browse down to the the subfolder there, has a bunch of parts within it. All right, so if you only wanted to see assemblies that are in that folder, you can just put the filter on there and that's all you're going to see. So I guess if you had like a really extensive design library that you set up and it contains parts and assemblies, that might be pretty helpful if you just want to drag and drop like a assembly of a valve or something like that into one of your designs. Be easy to pick it out.
Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of too, was like routing, right? There's some ability to do that with routing and use assemblies and use like assembly connection points and assembly routing points.
Yeah, definitely.
That sort of thing. Nice. Yeah, I think probably the kicker with this stuff often is like really file management, right? When you're dealing with how am I going to use this with my coworkers, right? And I mean, if you're working with a coworker, you should definitely be using PDM. And if you have it in PDM, the tricky part is that view over on the side, the design library view, doesn't automatically cache these files.
Right.
So typically what you need to do in a situation like this is you got to work with your PDM administrator, right, Brandon?
Exactly. So I totally agree with you there. If you're going to be using design library in a collaborative environment, you're going to want to share it, but you don't want people just making a mess everywhere, right? So PDM is a good way to control it, but at the same time, if a person's not familiar with how it got set up, understanding how that works with PDM is pretty critical. So something that we suggest for things like a design library or template locations, if you're going to store that stuff in PDM, there's a quick setting that your administrator can turn on for you just to refresh that folder as soon as you log in next time to PDM. So
they should be typically familiar with that from templates and stuff too, right? Like your drawing templates. And nice. Cool stuff. I mean, I think
got all kinds of things.
I think that's it for design library.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think something that a customer taught me, like, I guess it's been a few years ago now, is that like with those library features, they actually can bring over like equations too. So.
Oh, nice.
The person I hate equations, but you can bring over equations and they can be like configuration specific equations. And so those library feature parts can get pretty complicated if you really need them to be.
Yeah.
So,
good stuff.
Yeah, but it's fun. All right. So getting to the support question for today. Why doesn't my subassembly move? Well, that could be a couple of things. That could be a couple of things. All right, so let's talk about this for a minute here. So if I have a subassembly and I grab something and it can move in that subassembly, well, that's cool. That's expected. Now, when I create a new assembly and I insert this into that new assembly, go ahead and just hit OK here. That's going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to fix the location of it. So it's going to be stuck right at the origin if I just hit OK. So the origin's here. It actually aligned the origin of that lower level component and said, this thing can't move. And if what you're thinking you want to do is actually just move that component around in the coordinate system of this upper level assembly, well, that fixed needs to go, or that fixed needs to turn to float. All right, once it's on float, you can drag it around wherever you want. However, that's often not what people mean when they ask this. So if I go ahead and just fix that again, often what people mean is they want to know, this head moved in that lower level assembly. Why does it not move here? And the reason that is because when you bring an assembly in, it's treated as a rigid assembly. Basically, it doesn't solve the mates at this level, right?
Exactly.
Which makes it a lot more efficient for SOLIDWORKS to use this stuff. But if you wanted to do something like you have a hydraulic cylinder, or anything where you need to maybe test the range of motion, SOLIDWORKS provides the ability to change this to a flexible subassembly. So you can just toggle it off there, or you can go to the component properties on there. Then you can toggle between rigid and flexible. When it's flexible, I can move it and still have the same degrees of freedom available that I did at the lower level assembly. There's a couple of things that you need to know about this. So one, you're bumping those mates up, which means that your assembly performance generally is going to suffer. And especially if you have nested flexible subassemblies, that can be really difficult, like trying to figure out exactly how these mates are supposed to solve.
Yeah.
So best practice with this stuff is you move it throughout its range of motion, you test what you need to test, and then you set it back to rigid, right? You turn off the flexible.
Makes a lot of sense for long term, just to help with performance. The more you get into this stuff, the more familiar with that kind of, I guess, thought process you're going to be, right? I don't want to put all that information at the top level if I can avoid it. Mates are something that you want to try to limit if you can, for sure.
Yeah, have as many fixed components as you can. I think that's probably, if we talk about assemblies at some point, probably going to talk a lot about fixed versus like floating, and what the mates actually do. So
yeah, definitely.
There's a big conversation to be had around that. So
for sure.
But
that's a nice tip there. If you're not familiar with flexible subassemblies, that's how you do it.
Cool. Well, I think that our video from last week finally just finished its premiere. So
nice.
Hopefully that went well. You guys like that. And hopefully we'll be able to continue doing these on a regular basis if you guys like them. So if you do have feedback for us, please leave some feedback in the comments and stuff of what you want to see. We're trying to be active in there. So
yep.
But we'll have something good for you guys next time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, fun as always, Garrett. Thanks a lot for the tips. I know that the viewers probably enjoy it. So we will chat with you guys on the next episode.
Later, SOLIDWORKS nerds.